Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. My name is Dr. Nikki Anthony, and I'm excited to be with you all tonight. We have a really special session for those of you who are already in the mode of planning for post secondary transition. We have a special guest. I'll talk a little bit about her, then give her space to talk about herself. I'm really excited to have her again. I think this is about her third or fourth time being with us over the years since we started doing virtual sessions. So I'm really excited to have her, Dr. Brianna Patterson. I'll give her a little space shortly to talk about herself. But tonight's segment is dedicated to helping parents plan for post-secondary transition, asking questions, getting information that's going to help you and your child make the best decision now for later and as you go along. So if you have an elementary student, if you have a middle school student, if you have a high school student, tonight is still for you, no matter where you fall on that spectrum of education. All right. As we get started, I want to share the mission of Little Hands Big Hearts. So thank you for joining us. The mission of Little Hands Big Hearts, Little People Service Organization, is to develop little people and not so little people, because they have family members, big brothers, and big sisters, into servant leaders who think beyond themselves for the greater good through explicit and intentional opportunities for character development, selfless service to others, and community based volunteering. So, with that, we do a lot of things in the community. We have an international service project. If that's something that you think you would like to be a part of, don't feel bad about reaching out to us, getting more information. You can go on our website, www.littlepeopleserving.org, to find out more information. So, I've kind of shared the purpose, I would like to introduce to you all Dr. Brianna Patterson. We worked together previously in another district in the state of Florida. And she is just an awesome, awesome resource for families. She's an awesome person. Let me say that. She's an awesome person, but just an awesome resource also for people who are looking to move their child into their best future. So I'm excited to have her. She was recently named the Florida School Counselor of the Year. I think in the previous year, she won the Duval County School Counselor of the Year. And I think every year that I've known her, she's won some kind of award, like a big award. And so you all are getting a treat tonight because she is the woman, she's got the juice. So put your questions in the chat if you have any. But Dr. Patterson, feel free to introduce yourself, then we'll jump into our session.
Hi, everyone. I am Brianna Patterson. I am a school counselor. I have been in this role for the past 9 years. All of my experience has been in the high school setting. I currently work at Ribault High School, which is where I graduated. And I've also worked in another district in the state of Florida, as Dr. Anthony said. And I'm just excited to be here. One of my passions is post secondary readiness, making sure that when our students enter high school, they have a plan for what's going to happen next. I always tell my kids, once the pomp and circumstance of graduation dies down, that day after graduation, I want you to know what's next. That's my goal from the time they enter until the time they exit. So I'm excited to be here with you all tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we will kind of jump into our questions, but you kind of hit on something that I would like for you to expound on a little more. Why is it important to begin that planning process earlier? So a lot of people wait. As someone who worked in special education, that's actually how she and I became acquainted, through the special education process. As someone who worked in special education in high school, um, we often saw people who waited kind of to the end, to become vested in their academics and what they were supposed to be doing. They decide, last minute, I want to go to college. Okay, well, you haven't, kind of earned college grades all along until you got to 11th or 12th grade. Not saying you can't go, but now you want to go to an Ivy League school and your grades might not support Ivy League school right now. So why is it important for parents and students to become vested in this process early on, going through high school until they, are ready to transition?
It's important that they become invested early because every year, either doors are opening or closing for you based upon the decisions that you make. So, like when you're in middle school, the classes that you take determine what pathways are open to you in high school. I'm a dual enrollment coordinator at my school, and if students students are admitted into their acceleration programs like early college, IB, things like that, based upon their seventh grade test scores and their seventh grade and their eighth grade grades and whether or not they took Algebra 1 in middle school. When it comes to high school, and you're applying to college, you're pretty much using your grades from ninth through 11th grade because you applied to college at the beginning of your senior year. So you haven't earned any 12th grade grades at that point. So whatever it is that you want to do, is pretty much, again, those doors are either opening or closing based upon the decisions that you make. And I know that sometimes that can seem a little unfair, at least it feels that way to me, that someone is being admitted into a high school program based upon what they did in seventh grade. But that's the reality of the situation. And since we know that, we have to contend with that. So we have to make sure that we are thinking towards the future and keeping those doors open. Not necessarily that a student is going to walk through whatever that door is, but that door is not closed for them and they have the option should they choose to pursue that pathway.
That's really good. Thank you. Thank you. So, next question, first official question. That one's a little bit off the books. And if you all would please hit the share button. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. If we can't get you an answer tonight, Dr. Patterson has promised that she will get you an answer. So, if we need to take down your email address, you can feel free to email that to info@littlepeopleserving.org, and we'll get you answers if we don't get to answer you tonight on the segment. So, what are the options that are available for post-secondary education, excuse me, and how do you determine which one is best for your student?
So our common options would be four-year college. So like our major universities are what we thinking of. So like I'll keep it at the state of Florida since this is the Florida segment. So we're thinking University of Florida, we're thinking Florida State University. We might be thinking University of Central Florida or schools like that. But also state colleges. In Jacksonville, our big one or our one that we have here is Florida State College at Jacksonville, in Gainesville, Santa Fe, in Tallahassee Community College. So those what we used to refer to as community colleges, but many of them do have amazing four-year programs now. That can be an option. Trade schools for our students who may want to be a cosmetologist, or they may want to do a program that doesn't necessarily require a four-year degree, whether that's in it could be the medical field, or it could be truck driving school. It could be so many things, so many pathways in that trade school realm. And then military is an option for post-secondary education, especially if it fits the student's needs, if they are not opposed to it. Like for our students, we have an ROTC program with the Marine Corps. So I have students who they've been in a Marine Corps program, a junior Marine Corps program throughout high school, and they understand that that is a pathway to continue their education, and they're going to let the military fund their education. And then also apprenticeships. So something like the Jacksonville Electrical Alliance, if they want to become an electrician, we have all of those options. And I want to shout out our state colleges because I told you all that they have really good programs for bachelor's, but by chance, if you are not interested in continuing there all 4 years, if you want that traditional college experience, I have many students that take advantage of what we call 2+2 programs, which is where a student will start at a state college like FSCJ, and then they are automatically able to transfer into another institution. So a popular one is the Ignite program, I believe it's called, which is the partnership between FSCJ and FAMU. So students complete their AA at FSCJ, and while they're at FSCJ, they have an advisor that's working with them with the goal of transferring to FAMU or another school. Specifically for Ignite, it will be FAMU after high school. So all of these are options, and they don't have to be backup options. You can intentionally decide, hey, it's more cost effective, or my student is not necessarily I think, ready or mature enough to go off and be on their own. So to give them a little time, we're going to choose these options. And I think that leads into the second part of your question, which is how are we going to decide what's the best option for the students? And it's really going to vary based upon who your student is. And so a self-assessment is really key at first, thinking about what their likes are, what their dislikes are, what are their strengths, what are their interests, what are their goals. If like what is the financial investment? Can you afford as a family for them to go off to school, or is it the more financially responsible decision for them to stay closer to home? And what kind of lifestyle do they want? I know a lot of my students, the first thing they ask when we start doing any kind of career assessments is how much money does that make? And that's real because in this economy, and also in this world where we're talking so much about student loan debt, and people going to college and then maybe not being able to find a career in their field or a job in their field based upon what they majored in. Those are all things to consider. So I'll tell my students, like, I want you to like what you do. I don't want you to just do things for the money, but I understand that we need to make enough money to live, and quality of life is important for some people. They need to go into careers that have a high return on investment. They're going to make a lot of money to support the kind of lifestyle they want. And for other people, they're more in it for the passion. They're not necessarily concerned with making a whole lot of money. But I think that's the time to have really honest conversations with your children about what that looks like for them, so that you can consider all of those factors.
That is so good. Sorry, I had myself on mute. So, all the options that you listed, you talked about the four-year universities, state colleges, community colleges, trade schools, tech schools, military apprenticeships. You talked about the 2+2 program, funding sources. So, can you talk about how to access those things? And I want to specifically focus on people who are maybe of a lower income. They don't think that college or post-secondary, education, academic education is possible for them. So can you talk about what are some of the various options for funding your post-secondary ventures that are available to us?
Okay. So primarily you have two types of aid. You have need-based aid, and then you have merit-based aid. Need-based aid is what you earn, what you get based upon your financial situation. So how much money you have. And then the merit-based aid is going to be you earn it either based upon your academic ability, maybe your athletic ability, could be your artistic ability. When it comes to all of the funding sources, you will need to apply for the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid during October of your senior year. It opens October 1st. And based upon the information that your financial information as it is shared, they will determine whether you will fall into that category of need based or merit based. And for some students is going to be both. For ideally it's going to be both, for students who are from lower economic backgrounds based upon how they performed in high school. So once you do the FAFSA, it will tell you whether you qualify for different grants. One of the most popular grants is the Pell Grant, and that is a need-based grant for families who make under a certain amount per year. It varies based upon the number of people in your household and other factors like that. But they could also open the option for work study programs, which is where they allow students to earn money by working on campus at the college or university. And then they could also offer you loans, and that would have to be paid back, whereas the grants does not have to be paid back, and the work study is money that the student is earning, so it does not have to be paid back. Another thing, once students complete the FAFSA on October 1st, they should also go ahead and complete what we call the FFAA, which is the Florida financial aid application. So students are doing two things: the FAFSA, which is federal, that's everyone in the country, regardless of the state, and then also the state application. That will open you up for Bright Futures, which is a scholarship I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a moment. The Florida Student Assistance Grant, which is a need-based grant specifically for students in Florida. And then there are also other grants and scholarships. Bright Futures is something that I want more students to intentionally aspire for early. And when we talk about planning early, like starting the summer of eighth grade. So, Bright Futures is a merit based scholarship in the state of Florida. There are multiple awards. The two most popular are the Florida Academic Scholarship, which pays 100% of tuition, and the Florida Medallion Scholarship, which pays 75% of tuition at any public school in the state of Florida. Those dollars can be transferred to private schools, but they won't transfer at the same rate. So for the Bright Futures Award, there are requirements for GPA, there are requirements for test score, and there are requirements for either community service or work hours. Those requirements change significantly every year in terms of the test scores, but the GPA is pretty consistent. You need a 3.0 for the Florida Medallion and a 3.5 for the academic scholarship, and you need 75 hours of community service Florida for the Florida Medallion and 100 for the academic. So think 75%, 75 hours, 100%, 100 hours. The reason why I want students to think about this early is because when you're a senior and you are in the process of applying to college and you have grad bash and prom and all those fun things on the brain, 100 hours sounds like a feat for you. But if you start working on your community service in ninth grade, that's 25 hours a year. And you get your hours documented on whatever form your school uses and submit it, and you have that. Also, we this isn't one of the questions, but I really want to talk about this, the importance of intentionally preparing for testing. So when students are taking the SAT and the ACT, a lot of times they are just going into it blindly. They are not doing any real prep before they do it, and then they get intimidated, many of them, by the scores for that are required for Bright Futures because they seem really high. And of course, they seem high if you have not prepared. So that's something else that students can begin doing very, very early. Most of the schools, at least in our district, students are going to be taking the PSAT at least from 9th through 11th grade, which is the practice SAT. So students should be taking that seriously. Students should be analyzing their results, and they should be using those results to study so that they can perform better on the test, because for many of our students, especially the ones that I serve, they have the hours of community service. They're very civic minded. They have the grades, but those test scores are really a barrier for them. So I've really been trying to push the word of prepare early. Even if you can only study for a couple minutes each week for the SAT. Over time, if you start that in ninth grade and you're testing in 11th grade, think about how much further you're going to be versus it's 11th grade. This test counts for college for you. This test counts for scholarships for you. And it's your first time. You don't know what's on the test. You don't know how the information is going to be presented. You may feel like it's going to be hard for you to get a really good score, but it's not impossible. You just have to put in the work on the front end.
That is so good. So part of this program, our Future Forward Servant Leadership Development Program, part of it allows for our students who are active participants to take the test at no cost to them. Like, we'll pay for the testing, but we've added a component where students get to meet with our academic coach to work on test taking skills. So to specifically focus on taking these college entry board tests, ACT, SAT, PSAT, all of those, so that they can start seeing it. And the push is to do it earlier. So our seventh graders, eighth graders, having access to what the questions are looking like, you practicing those things, and you work with someone who's certified to help you go through these tests, but also doing the practice tests and then coming back and reviewing. And we have someone who supports our organization, and she was an administrator at a university in Alabama. And one of the things that she talked about was how students who come into college and they've made 1600 on the SAT or 28 on the ACT. Many of them started in middle school taking those tests, failing, but you see what it's like now. So now you have a baseline to begin growing on that test. So by the time they get to 11th or 12th grade, they are banging out those higher scores because they were pre-exposed to them. And so I just want to reiterate what Dr. Patterson said, pre-exposure. Like, we have a program where you can take those tests for free if you're actively participating with us. And these tests can be a little costly sometimes, especially if you're already, kind of in the hole or you have your money and funds going somewhere else. So take advantage of things like that, start testing them early, especially if they know they want to go to college, because you start to work out the kinks early on instead of getting to 11th or 12th grade and you are, kind of floundering because you don't know, you've never been exposed to this level of questions. So take advantage of those things. So thank you so much for highlighting that, Dr. Patterson. So I want you to talk about dual enrollment, the pros and the cons. When I was in school, this is pushing like almost 30 years ago, high school. Um, I don't remember dual enrollment being as big as it is now. I don't even know that we had that option. We had AP, we had honors. I never remember having dual enrollment as an option. So I don't know if it's fairly new or not, but can you talk about what the pros are for students who are offered dual enrollment versus students who are offered honors, placement, and what's the other one? AP. So talk about the pros and cons for probably all of those. So, if a parent has a student in AP or honors, if they need to switch, then, or talk to their counselor, they need to get on it.
Okay, so I'll start with honors because it's probably the most common. Honors is advanced in terms of the material that is presented and the pacing of the class. And honors allow students to raise their weighted GPA. So your unweighted GPA is your base GPA that is on a 4-point scale. So where A is worth 4 points, a B is worth 3 points, and so on and so forth. Once you start taking advanced classes like honors, advanced placement, and dual enrollment, those classes are actually weighted higher, which means that if you do well in them, you get more credit because the class is harder. So if you make an A in an honors, AP, or dual enrollment class, then your A is worth 5 points instead of the 4 points, which can be really beneficial when it comes to applying for colleges as well as scholarships, because many of them will take your higher GPA, which is going to be a weighted GPA. So honors students are usually selected by the schools to go into honors classes based upon their previous performance as well as their test scores. So if they are making level 4s and level 5s on their end of the year assessments, they're likely going to be going into an honors class. However, there are students who would do well in honors classes that are not necessarily identified. So don't be afraid to advocate if you think your student could do well, or even if you think your student may not make an A in an honor class, but you just want them to be challenged. That's okay too, to get that exposure to that more rigorous curriculum. When it comes to advanced placement, what I'll refer to as AP or dual enrollment, those are the classes that could translate to college credit. So for an AP class, that advanced placement is through College Board. So this is a nationally recognized program. College Board is the same organization that is over the SAT, which most of us are familiar with. The thing about advanced placement, the rigor is there in terms of being exposed to harder coursework earlier, and you can earn college credit. However, whether or not you earn college credit is based upon how you do on the AP exam. So you could be in the class all year and make straight A's all year, but maybe you have a bad testing day, or maybe you are just not a strong test taker. You will not get the college credit. There's colleges will see that you've been in this advanced placement class, but if you don't score at least a 3, then you won't get the college credit for that class. When it comes to dual enrollment, I always tell my students dual means 2. So it means that you're taking one class and it counts for 2 purposes. It counts for high school and it also counts for college. For dual enrollment classes, as long as you make a C in the class, you earn the college credit. Some of the cons of dual enrollment is that we can't determine how your credit transfers outside of public schools in the state of Florida. So if you are looking at a public school in the state of Florida, we have what we call an articulation agreement, which means that those colleges have to accept their credits as is. So they have to take it as a science. If it's a science, they have to take it as a math. If it's a math. Private schools do not have to abide by that, and schools outside of the state of Florida do not have to abide by that. So I have a student right now who graduated from high school with her associate's degree, and she is going to a private HBCU in Georgia, and they won't accept all of her credits. So she would have been going into her junior year if she would have went to a public school in the state of Florida, but they made her retake some of her classes or take something else from that category. And unfortunately, there's nothing we can do to kind of force them to take those credits. It's at the discretion of the school. Um, Another potential con of dual enrollment is that you are starting your college transcript. So if you do not perform well in the class, if you make a D or an F, that goes on your college transcript and you're starting your college GPA. And many schools, in terms of receiving financial aid, they have requirements that you maintain a certain GPA to receive financial aid. So if you're not doing well, let's say you take one dual enrollment class in high school and you make a D, you're starting your college transcript with under a 3.0 already because you have that one class. So this is something that I don't say to discourage people, but to be mindful of the implications. So keep that in mind. I will say, in terms of the AP, I talked about one of the primary cons being that if you don't do well on that test, you don't get the college credit. But I would say the pros are that AP is widely recognized across the nation. So you don't have the same issues as much with your credits potentially transferring. And also, it's not starting your college transcript. It's kind of like if you get the 3 or higher and you get the college credit, it can only help you, but it can't hurt you. It can hurt your high school transcript, but it can't hurt your college transcript in the way that a dual enrollment class can. So there are definitely pros and cons to each program. This is one of those know your child type situations. I think that sometimes our parents want what's best for us, but are not always the most realistic in terms of what we want for ourselves and the work that we're willing to put in. So you may have a child that is academically capable, but if you know that they don't have that self-determination, if they are not mature, if they are not really driven, then we do have to be careful about which direction we push them in because they could have long-term implications. And I would say take advantage of all of your options. So a lot of schools are not going to offer a class as an AP class and a dual enrollment class. They will have certain classes that are AP, certain classes that are dual enrollment, and honors is probably where you're going to see most of the course offerings. So play around with all of them, get a feel for it. Take a combination, see what feels right for you. And at the end of the day, do what is best for your child. Don't look to the right, don't look to the left, because every child is different. We want to make sure that we are supporting them and doing what's best for them based upon who they are.
That is so good. So you kind of took the words out of my mouth because I was going to say it sounds like a maturity thing, especially for dual enrollment, because you're talking about doing high school work and college level work all at the same time. So maybe talk about the importance of like soft skills, so organizational skills in this process of deciding how do you want to proceed into your post-secondary transition. Like, do you want to remain in regular ed? I don't know if the term is regular ed, but just general ed courses. Do you want to try honors? Do you want to try AP? Do you want to try dual enrollment? What does that look like? What are some questions maybe parents should be asking their students? What should parents be looking for, responsibility wise, maturity wise, organizational skills, all of that?
That's a really good question. First, I want to start off by saying a lot of the parents that I encounter have a tendency to want to pull back when students enter high school. because they understand that they are kind of on the tail end of their time with them as far as them being in the home, and they want them to be more responsible and more autonomous and kind of take control of their education. And I understand the thought process, but that is not that's not the time to do it. There are so many big decisions being made while students are in high school, and their brain, the smartest child, their brain is still not fully developed, and we have life experience on our side as the adults in their lives. So I would say walk alongside them and really just have a lot of discussions about what's best for them. Give them a voice, but at the end of the day, remember that you are the parent and you are there to guide them. And with that in mind, definitely the soft skills are very important. So you have kids who have the cognitive ability, they're really smart, but they are smart, so they've never had to study. So they're going to eventually hit a brick wall where that content, no matter how smart they are, is not going to come as easy to them. And some of our kids, because they never had to study, when they are struggling, it's not the time to learn study skills, right? So even though you have a child that may be bringing home straight A's, you still want to work with them on organization, on time management, on making sure that they have a study plan in place, whether that's flashcards. Some people like to write their notes over and over. Some people watch videos or read the textbook or whatever it looks like for your child, making sure that they understand, even while you're performing well, even when you don't have to study, you should still build that muscle, because there's going to come a point in time where you need those skills. So definitely paying attention to that. And then also, as a reminder, I said it before, but don't feel like your student, if they're in an honors class and they're bringing home B's, oh, I should move them back to standard. No, they need to be challenged, because college and post secondary options are going to be challenging. So if they are making a B in an honors class and they're being exposed to that rigor, even if they're not being successful by your standard of an A, they're being pushed to think about things in a new way. They're being pushed to challenge themselves, and that's only going to help them in the long run. Now, if they are struggling, like they're making D's and F's, obviously that level placement is not appropriate. But I would say, as the parent, don't freak out immediately if you have a straight A student and they take their first dual enrollment class and it's a college class. I'm going to say biology, because that's when I see a lot of my students struggling, and they make a C in biology. I ask my kids when they come to me, because sometimes this is the first time they made something that's not been an A or a B, and I say, did you do your best? Yes, Dr. Patterson, I did my best. I studied. I went to office hours. I talked to the professor, and I still made a C. Then that C is acceptable. It's okay as long as you're doing your best. Now, if you made a C and you didn't do all those things, then we might need to have a conversation about how we can learn from this. But don't automatically think that a student has to be a straight A student in order to be successful.
That's so good. And just as she said previously, it's a different scale. So that B looks different on their scale in an honors class or an AP class or dual enrollment than it does on a gen ed scale without the weighted scale. So keep that in mind. Thank you for hitting on that. Thank you so much. So what are some things that parents should be asking school counselors? And you can go by grade if you like. So ninth grade, what should they begin talking to counselors about? 10th, 11th, 12th, even middle school, because you are part, I'm sure you're part of transition from eighth grade to ninth grade. What should parents be asking the counselors? What should students be asking? Honestly, based on their grades, on, behavior is a big thing as well. Just because they're growing older doesn't mean that they're necessarily development for, I think, boys doesn't stop until full brain development is like 30 or so, and women's like 26, 27. So they're still learning and growing. We all are. So what are some things that parents can ask and students can ask as they move through their middle school into high school and past that point?
So I think if you know what options are available, like if you know that your child wants to go into early college, or you know they want to be in the IB program, or you know they want to be in the culinary program, or they want to do agriculture or whatever it looks like, definitely making sure that they're on track for that pathway. If you are not sure or your student is not sure, asking always about what options are available to my student, what options might not I be aware of that based upon what you know about my student might be a really good fit for them. Asking that question, asking, am I on track? So in middle school, am I on track for promotion each year? Because there are promotional requirements for middle school and high school. In high school, am I on track for promotion, and am I on track for graduation? You should also be asking for high school students, am I on track to graduate with the right diploma designation? Because some students are not on a standard 24 credit diploma. They might be on an 18 credit diploma, which could limit their post secondary options. So making sure that you're not allowing someone to say, oh, they need to be on an 18 credit diploma without explaining to you the difference between those two diploma tracks and what it can mean for their future. You should ask, what classes can my student take to stay competitive for whatever option it is that they want. So one of the things in the state of Florida, students are only required to take 3 sciences in high school. So likely that's going to be a science ninth, 10th, and 11th grade. Well, most colleges want to see 4 years of science. So even though a student doesn't need that fourth science, if you're a parent that's asking me, Dr. Patterson, what can my students do to have a competitive senior schedule? I'm going to tell you not to slack off on your core classes. I'm going to say take that fourth science, even though you don't necessarily need it for graduation. So asking them things like that. You can ask, are my PSAT scores competitive for XYZ? Are they average, below average, or above average? I believe middle school students take the PSAT or some other equivalent exam where you can see how your students are testing. Also in high school, same thing, before they take the SAT or the COT or the ACT, whatever test they choose, they're taking practice versions. So when those scores come in, if you don't understand how to interpret those scores, use your school counselor as a resource to help you understand this is their areas of strength or this is their areas of opportunity for growth. And then ask them, what can I do to help them prepare? Are you aware of any test prep options or any programs that you may have at the school or you're aware of in the community that could be helpful for them? Um, when you have a student, regardless of the grade level, you can say, what mistakes are students commonly making in this grade that I should look out for my child? So ninth grade, statistically speaking, is one of the hardest years of high school. More students drop out of school in ninth grade than any other year in high school because of that transition. So you knowing that, what are some of the things that you see with ninth graders that I can look out for with my child? Or what are some of the things you see in ninth grade that I should look out for as a student so that I can make sure that my start to high school is going to be successful? And then as they get in terms of exploring for careers, you can ask, what programs or pathways or opportunities are you aware of for college exploration? Do you know about any internships or volunteer opportunities that my students can look into? If they're in the medical field, are you aware of any programs in the medical field? If they want to go into criminal justice, do you have any connections in that area? You can ask them things like that. And then for their senior year, ask about workshops and support. So do you have a workshop for applying for scholarships or financial aid? Do you provide assistance with the college application process or college essays? I know at our high school, we have workshops for all of that multiple times a year for our seniors because we understand that this is their first time doing it. They're likely only going to be a senior one time in high school, right? So even though it's a process that I go through every single year because I work with seniors every single year, these students, this is their first time being exposed to many of those things and they do need support. So finding out about those opportunities, and then once you find out about them, hold your students accountable to take advantage of those opportunities. Because for me, in my experience, I typically see the same students over and over and over who have all the questions, but those kids receive all the help. So if I tell my kids, if you don't let me know that you need help, I assume that you don't. And it's only one of me and hundreds of you all. So I'm going to go to the students who are expressing that they need help. And that's a life skill, learning how to ask for help and advocate for yourself. So making sure that your kids know, hey, go reach out to your counselor. You should be scheduling a meeting with them at least twice a year, every single year in high school, to see where you are and what you should be working on, and holding them accountable for doing those things.
That is so good, very thorough. I did add those questions into the chat. So, parents, if you need to be reminded, just screenshot the chat of some of those questions. And again, Dr. Patterson has extended herself. If you have questions or you need, these questions, or you have something different that you want to ask her, feel free to drop it in the chat, or you can email or DM us, and we'll get those questions to her, and she will respond to you. Right. So, when should we begin applying for the options, the funding? I know you talked about FAFSA in 12th grade, senior year. I think you said October. Um, but when should we begin applying for schools or whatever we want to do? Military, the ASVAB, because that's associated with the military, so that you don't get to a point where you have to take a job that's something you don't want to do in the military if that's your goal because you didn't score high enough. So when is give us a timeline.
Okay. So for the ASVAB, which is a test that really any student can take, it's commonly used for the military, but it is an aptitude test. So I encourage all students to take the ASVAB because it's data, it's information. It's going to show you some of your strengths and weaknesses. You can begin taking the ASVAB as early as ninth grade in high school. Most schools offer those options. It's commonly promoted to juniors and seniors, but underclassmen can take it as well if there are spots available. So I would say test early and often for the ASVAB because you can only improve once you have exposure to the content on the test. And then in terms of meeting with a recruiter, that is, I will be honest, that's not my area of specialty, but you can contact them. I think meeting with the recruiter has more to do with your age than anything. There are certain things that can only be done at certain ages. So if you know that you're a military minded, it's never too early to contact the recruiter to let them know you're interested, and they can give you a more specific timeline of when you should be beyond the ASVAB, when you should be meeting with them about when you should be taking a fitness test or whatever other kind of exams that they may have for the various branches that you're interested in. When it comes to the financial aid process, again, the FAFSA and the Florida application for financial aid both open up October 1st. I highly, highly, highly encourage you all to apply for both on October 1st. For the FAFSA, which again is our federal aid, that is first come, first serve money. So what does that mean? Even if you qualify for it, if you apply late and the money is gone, unfortunately you won't get it. So apply as early as possible for that. Even the year before, thinking about who I want to make sure I say this in the correct way, but I know families have different dynamics, right? So a student maybe or a child may be living in your home, but someone else may be claiming them on their taxes. These are the times when they're in high school to start thinking about that because that can have implications for them on the FAFSA. Or some parents are reluctant to share their information because of things that are going on like that. And it's going to be hard for students to get any kind of financial aid if they don't have the FAFSA. So start thinking about what kind of implications could this have and keep that in mind, especially as they enter the year before their senior year, because you're always using the previous year's taxes for that information. And then for scholarships, most scholarships are available to seniors. I've only seen maybe one or two major scholarships that are open for juniors. What I'd like to tell my students is during junior year, start exploring scholarships and compiling a list because most major scholarships, they open the same time of year and the requirements don't change a whole lot. So even though you can apply for a lot of it during your junior year, if you kind of start compiling your list and you know what the eligibility requirements are and what kind of documentation you need to provide, you can start working on that early and it gives you a head start. But don't expect that you're going to be able to apply to a whole lot of scholarships during your junior year. And then for applying for like your traditional college, it's either state university or major university, you are looking at the summer after your 11th grade year. Most of those applications are going to open up in July. UNF, the University of North Florida, has a really big Apply in July campaign to get students to apply early. And it used to be where the major deadline for colleges, like if you want to receive your decision early, was November 1st. I've seen it go even earlier with FSU being October 15th. So between October and November of your senior year, if you are ahead of the game, which I encourage you to be, that's when your applications are pretty much due. So from the summer of your junior year until October or November, you should be applying to colleges. If you do that, then you will find out your decision. I've seen it as early as December and as late as February, but then you know where you stand and what you need to do next. Whereas sometimes I'm seeing an increase in students who are saying, oh, I'm just going to wait for a regular decision because I still need to test. Once again, test early. They get the senior year and they don't have test scores or they don't have competitive test scores, so they can't apply early. Well, after that February decision gets released, you are competing with a few spots that are left for the students who are deciding they don't want to go there anymore because they've already done most of their admitting. So again, being proactive, being ahead of the game, making sure that you put yourself in a position where you have everything that you need so that you can apply by October. And then if they defer you, which is to tell you they're not going to say a yes or a no, they're going to wait and reconsider you with the other applicants. Or if they tell you a yes, or if they tell you a no, either way, you have that information. And then you have from February until the end of the year to decide what your next course of action is. Whereas if you don't apply until January, February, and you're not getting the decision until May, and classes could start over the summer or classes are starting in August, then you may find yourself scrambling for housing or scrambling to figure out how we're going to pay for this or what other kind of resources and support we need. So I think the theme of the night has been early, 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 like do everything early. And again, I know it can be overwhelming. You have so many big decisions to make, but you don't have to be tied to any decision, but you will have your options and you will know what you need to do for each pathway if you are kind of involving yourself in the process earlier.
So good. So I have a question. You talked about FAFSA and possibly the money running out if you don't apply early enough. With the FFAA, I believe you said it was, does that funding depend on your FAFSA also? So students have to have a FAFSA in the system to receive that state funding. That's my question.
So I don't think that is true, but I don't know for sure. I know the primary reason why people do the FFAA is for Bright Futures, and that's merit based. You don't have to have a FAFSA on file specifically for Bright Futures, but you may need to have a FFA on file for the other grants, the state grants, because many of those grants are need based. And when you do the FFAA, I'm glad you asked this question because I probably wouldn't have said this otherwise. But the state financial aid application does not collect, financial aid information from the families. Only the federal one does. So when you do the state application, it's basically a matching system. You're just giving the state of Florida permission to share information from your transfer. That's all it is. So it only takes about maybe 10 minutes. So I would imagine if there are any grants that are need based, they would only have a way of pulling that information from the FAFSA, which is why I'm always going to say FAFSA first, because even for colleges, they have to determine how much money they are giving to need based students and how much money they are giving to merit based students, and they have to report that to the state. If you don't have a FAFSA on file, they don't know which category to put you in, and it could limit the amount of funding that you receive because they don't have that data to report. So, why is this important? even if you are not a family that would be considered low income or below the poverty line, you think maybe you make too much money for you to receive any kind of need based aid, you still want to make sure you complete the FAFSA so that it does not hinder your ability to receive any kind of aid, either on the federal level, which could be for students whose families make a lot of money. It could be loans where you don't have to take out the full amount, but let's say you're $1,500 short and you need that money, it's available to you. But it could also, that those same parameters are used in determining whether or not a school could give you a merit-based scholarship, because they need to know for a fact that you are merit-based and not need-based, or they need to know you're merit-based and you're need-based.
So good. So we are almost at the end of our segment. I want to talk about students with IEPs or students with disabilities and that process for them to move into post-secondary options. But I also wanted to ask if you could kind of talk about the so like letters of inquiry, or letters when you're trying to apply for scholarships and how they have you to write an essay, things like that. Just talk about the necessity of providing a quality essay. And I call it text talk. I believe the last time we had this conversation, I brought that up, text talk, and how our students are so used to writing, using phones and social media talk and all of this. It does not fly in the academic arena. So if you could just talk very briefly about expectations of an essay, and then we'll move into our IEP question, and then we'll be closing out.
Okay. So when you are writing a personal statement letter or a essay, whatever it is that either the college is requesting that you write, or it could be a scholarship, you want to make sure that you are using academic language. You want to make sure that you are not using text talk. You want to make sure, even something simple as, I have to remind my kids, you are a proper noun. So your first name and your last name should be capitalized always. You should be starting sentences with capital letters. You should be using punctuation. I know that sounds very simple, but our students communicate in informal ways a lot more often than they communicate formally. So sometimes those skills are lost or not remembered. But those things leave either a positive or a negative impression on the reviewer. So you could have the most profound thing to say, but if the person who's reading it can't understand it, is it that profound? They don't get it. So, keeping those things in mind, and also thinking about early, maybe some of the pieces of writing that you're using in schools, how they can be converted for that purpose later on. So maybe an essay that you wrote that you're really proud of in your English class, you might not be able to use the same essay, but you may be able to take elements of that essay and infuse it into that piece of writing. I've seen now where more schools are not necessarily giving you a specific prompt, they're telling you just to share a piece of writing. I am the National Honor Society advisor at my school, and my students have to write an essay in order to be considered to join the organization. And it's 500 words, and they have to talk about either leadership or service and tell me how they have embodied that characteristic with examples. And so many of my students have been able to use that essay that they wrote for NHS, whether they ultimately got accepted into the organization or not. They have that piece of writing that they can now tweak and change into other things for that option. And while we're talking about that, I want to remind students, please do not use AI. So Chat GPT and things like that, it's becoming more and more common. And a lot of schools have AI detectors. So they know that when they know when you are using AI. And in a lot of AI, once you see enough of it, you recognize patterns in the way that information is presented to people. So if you read enough essays, you can pick up on what's authentic and what is almost too perfect. So take your time, don't rush through the process. Demonstrate your integrity and make sure that you are submitting writing that is your own. Now, if you are going to use AI, use it ethically. Don't use it to write anything, but if you have an idea that you want to flesh out, it's okay to type it in there and see what ideas it can give you and use that information to write your own, but don't provided with a prompt and then expected to spit out something to you that you can then pass off as your own. So that's what I have to say about that. And then for your last question on IEPs and working with students who either have IEP or 504, so a student with a documented disability. The first thing that I want to say to parents is to make sure that you attend meetings and make sure that you speak up and advocate. Make sure that you ask questions. I am guilty because I've always worked in education of using a lot of educational jargon, using a lot of acronyms that people who don't work in education may be unfamiliar with. And it's just a habit because that's the world that I live in. But I appreciate when parents say, hold on, slow down, walk me back, you know, can you explain what this acronym means? Or can you tell me in layman's term what this means? Don't be afraid to do that. Um, transition planning, excuse me, is a part of the IEP process. So they should, if your student is in high school, always be talking to you about transition goals and what you plan to do or what your student plans to do after high school. Making sure that you're getting a copy of your IEP or your 504 accommodations annually. So you're keeping up with that. You're making sure that the accommodations are being received by your student, but also you're going to need that IEP or that 504 if your student is transitioning to college. It's going to be the student's responsibility to take that to the Office of Accommodations to ensure that they have a record that the student has a disability on file. That's not a question that they would ask when they're applying because they don't want that to factor into their decision. So after they've been accepted and you know the student is going there, make sure you reach out to that office to get those accommodations on file and understand that the accommodations a student receives in high school may not necessarily translate to what they receive in college. They could be different. And then the last thing that I want to say is make sure that you are looking into the Florida Vocational Rehabilitation Program. We call it VOC Rehab for short. This helps with career counseling, job training and placement, and even workplace accommodations if your student needs it. They typically apply for VOC Rehab in 11th grade. So you should be having those conversations about that in ninth and even 10th grade. Again, and then with our theme for the night, the earlier the better. Go ahead and get that information so that you know how to plan.
So, so good. So good. And with Vote Rehab, there is a required assessment that I believe happens in 11th grade. But if you have not, at least this was the previous standard, if you have not um, been involved in this VR process from, I think, ninth grade through, it's going to be very hard to start in 11th grade, basically. So start early. If your student all students should have a post-secondary plan. So start early exploring VR. That's the theme of the night. That's the theme of this organization, actually. Pre-exposure, early exposure. So start early. So I want to say thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. She's given some really, really excellent information. If you have any questions, again, feel free to email us and we'll forward them to Dr. Patterson. Make sure we'll just email us, we'll forward them to her, and we'll have her to send the information back to you. Just a few things. We have a test taking skills blitz that is focused on our students being able to take their test, their state testing. So reach out to us, sign up if you're interested in having your student be a part, and we'll go from there. Thank you, Dr. Patterson, for sharing with us. Do you have any final thoughts?
Thank you for being here. I know a lot of this information sounds overwhelming or it may seem that way. Don't be afraid to reach out to the school counselor at your school. They are a resource. Feel free to use them. And if you have any questions that I can answer, please let me know. I'd be happy to help in any way I can. And thank you, Dr. Anthony, for inviting me here tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being with us. On that note, good night, everybody. And please hit share. Share this with people you know have students in high school transitioning. All right. Good night.